Let's proceed straight into the next session, shall we? Now, chat rooms, some years ago, were these social networking platforms. Today, it's Twitter and Facebook. What's next? And how can brands cope and engage users? To engage us in this fascinating debate, I'd like to invite on stage Ms. Kate Day, Community Editor, Daily Telegraph Online, who has actively used social media to build an audience for Daily Telegraph. Ms. Day, may we have you on stage, please? Welcome. Welcome. I'd like to invite Mr. Arvind Rajan, Managing Director and Vice President, Asia Pacific and Japan, LinkedIn. If you could please come on stage. And if we could have Mr. Earl Wilkinson, Executive Director and CEO of International News Media Marketing Association, better known as INMA. Moderating this discussion is Mr. Rishad Tobaccowala, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer, Vivaki. Welcome. A Publicis Group entity that combines the collective scale, clout, and talent sitting inside of Denuo, Digitas, Razorfish, Starcom Media West Group, SMG, and Zenith Optimedia. Mr. Tobaccowala, may I hand it over to you, please, to take over?
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. And this particular panel is going to be the exact reverse of what this conference is about. So this conference is uncertainty, the new certainty. This panel is about certainty, the new uncertainty. And what do I mean by that? We are quite certain that over the next 3-4 years, the most driving force in media and communications will be social media. The question of when, in the next 4-5 months, Facebook hits 1 billion users. A question of when, sometime in the next year, LinkedIn maybe hits 200 million users. When Twitter hits 250 to 300 million users. And already today, more people spend time on Facebook in certain countries than on the rest of the internet. So one thing that we are absolutely certain about is that social media is going to be a huge deal. That's why that's the new certainty. The uncertainty is what in the world does that mean? What does it mean for companies? What does it mean for people? What does it mean for marketers? What does it mean for media companies? On that, there is a great deal of uncertainty. And to help us, today we've got 3 esteemed panelists, and the good thing about them is that they are all practitioners, or in the case of Earl, he goes and sucks the mind of all the practitioners, and he's brought it to us today. And I'm going to ask each one of them only one same question. After that, each one is going to get a different question, and then we're going to have a conversation. So the opening question for each one of them, and I'll start with Kate, and we'll work our way down, this is about social media. You've got 4 minutes or so to be as smart as you can about social media to this crowd, and let's see if you can be tweeted, Facebooked, and LinkedIn about what you say. Kate, go ahead.
Thank you. And I wanted to start by thanking you all for having me here. One of my first experiences as a journalist was doing a bit of work experience as a photographer for The Hindu, and I haven't been back for many years, so it's really, really nice to come back and have a chance to come to Delhi. In terms of social media, I think I'd like to make 3 basic points. And the first is an answer to a question that I get asked all the time. What's next? What's the next big platform? Where's the next Facebook coming from? And to that, my answer is really, this is all about people rather than platforms. It's very easy to try and wrestle with what the next technology is, to feel like you're the smart one because you've heard of a network that nobody else has ever heard of. But actually, the underlying shift here is in patterns of behavior. For me as a journalist, it's in my relationship with my readers. And for brands, it's in the relationship between the brand and customers. That's a huge change, and it's a big shift. And if you can get your head around that shift, then whatever the next platform is, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's a platform nobody's even heard of, whether it's Google+, it almost doesn't matter because you're understanding that shift in behavior. So that's my first point. Think about the people first. Understand what it is your customers want first, and then worry about the best technology second. My second point is really just a lesson I've learned over the last few years working with The Telegraph, trying to use social media. And that's to remember, and in a way it's a cliche for digital, but remember that this technology really challenges the structure of your organization. Digital did that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is still doing that. Social media does that in a whole new way. So if we have an active Facebook page, journalists quite reasonably want to have a say about what goes up there. But our sales department want to say what goes up there too. And our marketing department have a great new product they want to put up there as well. And our customer service team say they should look after it because lots of readers leave questions up there that really customer service should answer. So suddenly you have a page that most of the company has quite a legitimate claim to be a part of and to care about and to start interacting with. And unless you address that at the beginning and you work out a structure that's going to be flexible and that's going to be able to meet the challenge of all of these different departments coming together and collaborating, you're going to end up with an awful lot of different voices trying to talk to your customer. And actually, from the customer's point of view, they don't care which department they talk to. They just want to get the answer. So get your own house in order, start talking to each other, and then you'll make the journey for your customers a whole lot easier. And my third and final point is really to challenge your own assumptions and to keep on challenging them. A lot of people come to me with ideas, and when you start talking to them, their ideas about social media are resting on some assumptions that aren't necessarily true. So they'll say, older people aren't really into this stuff. Or, Facebook's the biggest, therefore let's do something with Facebook first. Now, happily, none of this happens in some kind of dark cave. None of this is under the radar. It's all very transparent. Go and look at your pages. Go out and talk to people. You can see these conversations happening. But also, the data's there as well. So if you want to know how old your Facebook fans are, you can go and look at the insights on your page and find out. So before you start assuming certain things about your audience, go out and look at the numbers, look at the data, listen to all of those clues that social media is giving you, and then you can make a really smart choice about which network is going to be best for you. So I guess those would be my opening 3 points.
Perfect, thank you. Arvind?
I feel a lot of pressure trying to sound intelligent for the next 4 minutes. So, but maybe I should start by laying out a little bit about how we see the world of social media and how sort of the major players in the social media ecosystem sort of fit with one another. And I think in today's world, we think of sort of three major players: Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, as true global platforms. And we like to think that the landscape that each one of these companies occupies is quite distinct and different, although the audience in many cases is the same. My guess is from an audience overlap perspective, they're really the same people on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. But the context and the ways they use them are fundamentally different. We like to think of Facebook as a platform that has completely transformed your family and your social life. So the way you communicate and share photographs with your family, the way you communicate with friends has completely been changed because of Facebook. Twitter is a syndication platform to get thoughts out there into the ether in any context. And LinkedIn is about your professional life. It's completely about what you do as a professional. And so the context of what one does on LinkedIn is fundamentally different. And it also means if you're a marketer or you're an agency, the kinds of campaigns that you run on LinkedIn versus what you do on Facebook and Twitter are also different. And for a bunch of reasons. One, the kinds of things people are doing on LinkedIn are different. The way to reach them is fundamentally different than what you're doing on Facebook. And we can spend a little bit more time talking about it. Now, I think over the last 2 to 3 years, social media has been this brave new world that everyone's a little terrified about. It's been really heartening to see a pretty strong, significant evolution over the last year in terms of agencies and marketers really now getting what to do. But I think the rules that apply on social media are fundamentally different, and there's still a lot of education to be done. But I think one of the big things that companies need to understand is that in today's media landscape, as you all know, the way to engage an audience is different. It's not simply about pushing messages out, telling customers what to buy. They're expecting to have a conversation with you. Now, in order for you to engage in a conversation, you need to begin with a foundation of trust. You've got to have credibility, and social media is a great opportunity to do that. So many of the most successful campaigns for brands and for brands on LinkedIn have been campaigns about cultivating and building a community. First, attracting an audience, having a relationship of trust that you build with them, and then once you've established trust, leveraging that community to achieve your broader marketing goals. And there's a process to doing that, which I'm happy to talk about. But there are a lot of sort of fundamentals that are different. And again, what we love to see is, what we're excited to see is that, especially here in India, we've seen a real transformation in how organizations are beginning to think about social media. I had the good fortune of speaking in front of NASSCOM last year at a major conference, and we were having a discussion about LinkedIn at that point. And I think the kinds of questions we were getting were relatively basic. Today, a year later, I spoke in July, and it was a completely different conversation. And it's really exciting to see that development. I think it's still got a ways to go everywhere around the world, but I think we're on the right path. And again, we can share best practices. We can share. I'm happy to share stories about what people are doing that has turned out to work.
Great, thanks. Earl?
How many of you are employed by media companies? Show of hands.
Wow.
Thank you, Bhaskar. The International News Media Marketing Association, or INMA, is a nonprofit association with about 6,000 members at 500 of the top news media companies worldwide in about 80 countries. And as Rishad suggested, my job is to meet with as many of them as I can, crowdsource the best ideas, and try to bring those best practices to the table. That's what we do. And for this panel discussion, I tried to tap the INMA network to find some new ideas related to social media. Social media traditionally for newspapers began in about 2007 with Twitter feeds and Facebook and LinkedIn. But I think that we are about to hear in this panel that we've turned the page, we've advanced the agenda quite a bit in the last year. In fact, I'd like to sort of begin this with 4 key points for media companies that sort of go beyond that traditional strategy of Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Point number 1, as we look for new value in things that we've traditionally done, sharing has become the value-added special sauce for journalism online. And what we see when we look out over the landscape, that newspaper websites that have robust sharing capabilities are seeing an increase in engagement and an increase in audience. And maybe we can talk about that later. Point number 2, especially for media companies, what do we hear all the time? We hear that smaller companies, individuals can replicate what we do, and I don't believe that's true. And in fact, I would say that leveraging our scale to create an echo chamber for our content is a critical strategy, emerging strategy, for why we need to be in this space. Number 3, I believe that we have to become the curators of the conversation with our audiences and our communities. So it's not just enabling the chatter, enabling the feedback, but how do you structure it? How do you prioritize it? How do you make sense of it for your audiences? And then finally, I think the part that we have not done as an industry is projecting newspapers and news brands as a trusted voice on social media platforms, and then finding value-added ways to bring that conversation back to websites. I believe, in fact, that what newspapers need to be doing is resourcing and committing resources to 1, 2, 3 people at these companies and going out there and being trusted voices out in the community, out in the blogosphere, and eventually create link backs to the website, but be that trusted voice and help humanize the newspaper brand.
Perfect, great. So to sort of summarize, there are 3 big things that you've heard today so far. One is about people, and that was the point that all 3 of our speakers have made. And one way of looking at social media is not to use the word social or media, and instead to use the word people's network. So you should ask yourself, how are you as a marketer, as a media company, as an agency, as a client, engaging with the people's network? And the people's network is not new. Word of mouth was always very, very powerful. The difference is, in the old days, word of mouth did not scale. But today, word of mouth scales. So, yesterday I might have said, I don't like something, and no one would have listened. Today I tweet out, I don't like something, and if some of my followers retweet it, I can reach 1 million people in 15 minutes. That's the people's network, and that's very powerful, and therefore understanding people is as, if not more important than understanding platforms. Not that platforms don't matter, but that's one key thing. The second, to the point that was made by Earl, it's very, very important to keep in mind that this can be positive for your business. That in many ways, uncertainty tends to be actually good for market leaders. Because if people are very uncertain, they don't know what to shift to. But they definitely know what to shift to if the market leaders act like stupid fools, right? Then they say, well, these people definitely don't get it. Interestingly, not only the news media organizations, but look at television. Today, television usage in America is at an all-time high. And one of the reasons why television usage is at an all-time high is because of the people's network. People are sharing and talking about the television shows that they're watching, and they're spreading that around. So this is a pal and not necessarily an enemy. All 3 of these folks made the reference to organizational challenges. A line that we use is, the future does not fit in the containers of the past, and the future does not fit in the mindsets of the past. And interestingly, the single biggest challenge that all of us will have is primarily that the future is different. One thing I can be very certain about is the future is different, and we keep trying to bring it into our organizations. And whenever we put out press releases saying we're going to change things, I ask a very simple question to anybody. Could you please explain to me what your incentive systems are? If your incentive systems are to continue to reward people for current behavior, it doesn't matter what you're saying. If the way you make money is the old way, then that's the way you will work. And that's very, very important. The future does not fit in the containers of the past. So those are 3 key things. Now let's twist it to a little bit different. And I'm going to ask Arvind to talk a little bit about, in more detail, about the key leaders, including one that we heard a little bit earlier today from, because I think they'll still be around. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Google+.
So, I prefer to really not talk about other companies, except at a high level. These are all great companies.
Well, they're all great companies. I'm not saying make fun of them. Yeah. I say celebrate them. So make them smart.
Okay, sure. Well, I think they've each transformed the world in their own unique ways. And it's interesting, if you had, if any of these companies had begun by doing a focus group and asking people, describing the service and asking people, what do you think you'd buy from it or use this service? I think everyone would have said, no way. I think if LinkedIn had done a focus group and said, well, let's describe what this is, And people say, well, it's ridiculous. Why would I do it? In fact, I joined LinkedIn on the first day. I think I was the 49th member. And I joined because someone asked me to do it. I didn't get any value out of it for a while until the network grew big enough. And I think it's true for all these companies. Again, if you'd asked, Google is so transformative now. But I remember when Google started, my cousin was an early employee there. But at the time, people were going, why would we need another search engine? We have Yahoo, we have Alta Vista. I'm trying to remember the names of these. Excite, remember Excite? These were the winners already, and Google completely changed it. So again, they had a core, really strong idea they completely believed in when no one else did, and turned it into something really remarkable. But I think we're all going after the world in slightly different ways. And let me speak a little bit about LinkedIn. Our mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. So it's completely about your professional life. It's not about games. It's not about exchanging photographs with your family. And people are using it to really become smarter in their career, become better professionals. And one of the most interesting things that we've done recently is done a lot more work with media companies. Earl and I were just talking about this earlier today, but we're now seeing a really explosion of news sharing on LinkedIn. And people are doing different kinds of sharing on LinkedIn than they're doing, for example, on Twitter and Facebook. What they're doing is sharing professional content with colleagues. And they're doing it in a way that is that where everything that they're sharing is a reflection of their professional brand. What that means is they're not sharing, for the most part, even though they could, they're not sharing their favorite sandwich they ate yesterday. They're not sharing about a cool movie they saw. They're sharing about an article they read that was very interesting. They're sharing some new insight they got from a colleague. And so that kind of context is very, very different from the kinds of things people are doing on Facebook. Now, Twitter is a bit of an overlap. I mean, Twitter is a broadcast platform that integrates with everything and integrates with LinkedIn. They're a partner of ours. But the kinds of things that people are doing on LinkedIn, again, is quite different. Google is an amazing company. I mean, what they've done in search is remarkable, transformed advertising. With Google+, I guess I don't know. I'm still not sure how Google+ will fit into the broader ecosystem. But, I think it'll be entertaining for everyone to watch.
Great. You mentioned sharing. And one of the key things for those of you who look at the New York Times, if you go to the New York Times on the web or on your phone or on your iPad, you'll notice that one of the tabs on the top is most shared, most emailed. Do you know that it's the most popular way people actually now read the newspaper? Talk a little bit about sharing and sharing in the news organizations.
Well, one of the, among the key motivators to share are emotion, power, identity, information. In fact, the New York Times came out, as many of you know, they put up a paywall, a paid content strategy. But one of the workarounds of that paywall is that if you share content, you can get free access to it. So I, the sharer, have the power to share with you, and now then you can click through, link back to the New York Times without paying. And the thought process apparently behind that is a study that they did called The Psychology of Sharing. And that internal survey, or that report, essentially made the following 4 or 5 points. That sharing information allows the sharer, and media owners, listen to this, sharing information allows the sharer to remember more, search for more, explore more, control more, and read more. We are an industry that is obsessed with quality journalism, an unrealistically high degree of quality journalism. If you were to rate our quality from 0 to 100 and realize our newsrooms are always aiming for 100%, what the New York Times research seems to suggest is that you could probably accept a little less in quality and implement a little bit more in sharing and create a better user experience in the process. So I would just say to you that the power of sharing apparently is insanely powerful.
And now Kate is in charge of a lot of different things. And she's going to explain why and what she does and why in the world she has the job she has, and both the risks and benefits of sharing and communicating with the people out there far away.